My name is April, and until 2 weeks ago, I thought my life was pretty good. I had a steady job at Marshall Financial Group, a Fortune 500 company with branches in almost every state. I lived in a nice apartment in Boston with my boyfriend of 3 years, Tyler. We met during my senior year of college, and things moved quickly between us. After graduation, I landed my dream job as a financial analyst, and Tyler moved in with me when I signed the lease on a bigger place. I remember the night everything fell apart. It was Madison's birthday party. She's one of my coworkers and closest friends in Boston. The party was at this upscale bar downtown, with a private room in the back. The party was in full swing when I decided to use the restroom. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed a couple making out in a dimly lit corner near the coat check. I didn't mean to stare, but something about the guy's profile looked familiar. When he shifted slightly, my stomach dropped. It was Tyler, my Tyler, with his hands all over some blonde I'd never seen before. I stood frozen, watching as they kissed. It took a few seconds for my brain to process what my eyes were seeing. Then the anger hit me like a tsunami. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted, loud enough that several people turned to look. Tyler jumped back like he'd been electrocuted. His eyes widened when he saw me. "April, this isn't." "Don't you dare say this isn't what it looks like," I spat, my voice shaking. "Because it looks exactly like my boyfriend cheating on me at my friend's birthday party." "April, please, let's go home and talk about this," he pleaded. "Home?" I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to my ears. "You mean my apartment that I pay for? The one you live in rent-free because I'm an idiot who believed you loved me? I want your stuff out of my apartment by tomorrow." I turned and walked out of the bar, ignoring Tyler calling my name. Madison followed me outside and helped me get a cab. I was too angry to cry. That would come later, when I was alone in my apartment, surrounded by Tyler's things that reminded me of what a fool I'd been. For the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on extra projects. But every time I went back to my apartment, the emptiness hit me. Not because I missed Tyler, the anger was still too fresh for that, but because I realized I had no real ties to Boston other than my job. My real home was back in Pinewood, a small town in upstate New York. The house my dad had built with his own hands, the one he'd left to me when he died from cancer 8 years ago. I was 19 and in my sophomore year of college when it happened. Mom had called me at 3 a.m. to tell me Dad had taken a turn for the worse, but by the time I made the 6-hour drive home, he was already gone. Dad had left the house to me in his will. It was his way of making sure I'd always have a place to call home. After the funeral, I went back to college and tried to focus on my studies. Mom lived in the house alone for about a year, and then she dropped a bombshell on me. She was getting remarried to a guy named Robert, who had 2 teenage kids from a previous marriage. I wasn't happy about it. It felt too soon after Dad, and the idea of strangers living in our family home made my skin crawl. But Mom pleaded with me, saying she was lonely and that Robert was a good man who made her happy. In the end, I agreed to let them move in. What else could I do? I loved my mom, and the house was too big for her to live in alone. After graduation, I took the job in Boston instead of moving back home. Part of it was the career opportunity, but if I'm being honest, a bigger part was that I didn't feel like it was my home anymore. The few times I visited during holidays, I felt like an outsider. Mom was always busy with Robert or his kids, Emma and Jason. They were polite enough, but it was clear I wasn't part of their new family unit. As I sat in my half-empty Boston apartment, scrolling through my phone and ignoring Tyler's texts, I made a decision. It was time to go home, to my home. My company had a branch in Albany, just a 30-minute drive from Pinewood. I could transfer there, reclaim my house, and start fresh. I called my boss, Mike, the next morning and asked for a meeting. "April, what's on your mind?" he asked as I sat down across from his desk. "I need to request a transfer to the Albany branch," I said, getting straight to the point. He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "You're one of our best analysts, April. I'd hate to lose you entirely. Let me make some calls and see what we can work out." 3 days later, Mike confirmed my transfer. I'd be taking a small pay cut, but I could live with that. The cost of living in Pinewood was a fraction of Boston's anyway. That night, I called Mom to tell her the news. "Mom, I've got something to tell you," I said when she answered. "I'm moving back home, to the house." There was a pause. "Oh, when?" "In about 2 weeks, I just wanted to let you know so you could get my room ready." Another pause. "Longer this time, your room?" "But Emma's been using that room since she started college." "Well, she'll have to move to one of the other bedrooms," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It's my house, Mom." Of course," she said quickly. "It's just unexpected, but we'll be happy to have you home." Something in her voice told me the opposite, but I pushed the thought away. "Great, I'll see you soon then." As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that my homecoming wasn't going to be as simple as I'd hoped. But I was determined to reclaim my life, and my house, no matter what. The 2 weeks before my move went by in a blur. I terminated my lease, sold most of the furniture, and packed up everything that mattered. My friends threw me a goodbye party at our favorite bar, deliberately not the one where I'd caught Tyler cheating. The drive to Pinewood took nearly 6 hours. I pulled up to the 2-story colonial house on Maple Street, my house. Dad had designed it himself, working with a local builder to create our family home. The blue paint was a shade darker than I remembered, and the flower beds Mom had always meticulously maintained looked a bit overgrown. Before I could even grab my bags, the front door opened, and Mom stepped out. She looked older than when I'd last seen her at Christmas, new lines around her eyes and her brown hair now streaked with more gray. "April," she said, walking toward me with open arms, "welcome home." I hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume. "Hi, Mom." Robert appeared in the doorway, watching us. He was a tall man with thinning hair and a permanent frown. I'd never disliked him, exactly, but I'd never warmed to him either. "April," he nodded as I approached the house. His eyes swept over my car, packed to the brim with boxes and suitcases. "Looks like you brought your whole life with you." "Just the essentials," I replied, forcing a smile, "most of it's clothes and work stuff." He grunted, not offering to help with my bags. "Well, Emma's moved her things to the guest room, your old room's ready." Mom gave him a look I couldn't quite interpret, then turned to me. "Come inside, honey, you must be exhausted from the drive." The inside of the house felt both familiar and strange. The layout was the same, but the furniture had been rearranged, and many of the decorations I remembered from my childhood were gone, replaced by items I didn't recognize. As we walked through the dining room, Emma and Jason appeared from upstairs. Jason, now 17 and nearly 6 feet tall, gave me an awkward nod. "Hey," he said. "Hey, Jason, you got tall." Emma, 19 and dressed in what looked like designer clothes, stood with her arms crossed. Her expression made it clear she wasn't happy to see me. "So you're actually staying," she said, not bothering to make it sound like a question. "Emma," Mom warned. "What?" "It's not like it's a secret she's moving in." I had to spend all day moving my stuff to that tiny back room. I took a deep breath. "It's good to see you too, Emma." Dinner that night was tense. Robert talked about his job at the local bank, Jason mumbled responses when directly addressed, and Emma picked at her food while glaring at me occasionally. "So," Robert said eventually, "how long do you think you'll be staying?" I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. "I'm not staying, I'm moving back. This is my permanent home now." Robert exchanged a glance with Mom. "Right, of course. It's just that we've gotten used to certain arrangements around here." "I'm sure we can all adjust," I said evenly. "I'll be working full-time at the Albany branch, so I'll be out of the house during the day." "I had to give up the big room because of you," Emma blurted out. "I've been using it for 2 years, and now I'm crammed into that closet of a guest room." I waited for Mom or Robert to say something, to remind Emma that it was my house and my room. But they remained silent, looking uncomfortable. "Actually," I said slowly, "this entire house belongs to me." Dad left it to me in his will, so technically, I could choose any room I want. No, this is bullshit. Emma stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled. I had everything set up in that room for college. My desk, my vanity, everything. And now I'm supposed to cram it all into a room half the size because Princess April decided to grace us with her presence? She stormed out, slamming her door so hard the dishes rattled. Mom gave me a reproachful look. Did you have to antagonize her? I stared at her in disbelief. I antagonized her? She's the one who started complaining the minute I walked in the door. Mom's expression hardened. Let's not do this tonight. You're tired from the drive. Things will look better tomorrow. But things didn't look better the next day, or the day after that. I started my new job, throwing myself into learning the ropes at the Albany branch. It was smaller than the Boston office, but the work was familiar, and I quickly established myself. I reconnected with a few high school friends who were still in the area, including my best friend from senior year, Megan, who now worked as a nurse at the local hospital. 2 weeks after I moved back, I came home from work to find Emma decorating the living room with streamers and balloons. "What's all this?" I asked, setting down my laptop bag. "My birthday party," she replied without looking at me. "It's on Saturday." "That's cool. Should I get you a gift or something?" I tried for politeness, though the last thing I wanted to do was shop for my sulky stepsister. Emma snorted. "No need, you won't be here." "Excuse me?" Mom appeared from the kitchen then, looking nervous. "April, honey, can I talk to you for a minute?" She led me to the back porch, where we used to sit and watch the sunset when I was a kid. Now it was cluttered with Robert's tools and gardening equipment. "Emma's having some friends over for her birthday on Saturday." Mom twisted her hands together. She was hoping to have the house to herself for the evening. I stared at her. "Are you actually asking me to leave my own house for Emma's party? Just for a few hours, you could go to a movie, or have dinner with Megan." "Are you kidding me?" "Mom, this is my house. I'm not going to be kicked out for a birthday party I wasn't even invited to." "Please don't make this difficult," Mom pleaded. "Things have been tense enough since you moved back." "And whose fault is that? You all act like I'm intruding, when I'm the one who owns this place." Mom's face fell. "I thought you might do this as a favor to me." That hurt. I stood up. "I won't make a scene at Emma's party. I'll stay in my room, but I'm not leaving." Mom looked disappointed, but nodded. "I'll let Emma know." At dinner that night, Emma made her displeasure known. "I guess I'll just have to move my party to Luciano's," she announced dramatically. Since some people, she glared at me, won't compromise. I bit my tongue, focused on my plate, and said nothing. Robert muttered something about the cost of restaurant parties, and Jason, as usual, looked bored with the whole situation. On Saturday, Emma and her friends went to Luciano's for her birthday. The house was blissfully quiet, and I spent the evening in my pajamas, watching movies in the living room and enjoying having the place to myself. For the first time since moving back, I felt at peace in my own home. Life settled into an uncomfortable routine over the next few months. I went to work, came home, and tried to avoid conflict with my housemates. It was hard to think of them as family anymore. Most evenings, I'd eat dinner quickly and retreat to my room or go out with Megan or other friends I'd reconnected with. At work, things were going well. My boss in Albany appreciated my experience from the Boston office, and I was already being considered for a team lead position. The commute wasn't bad, and I enjoyed the familiar scenery of my hometown. Sometimes on my lunch breaks, I'd drive past my old high school or the park where Dad used to take me fishing. One evening in late summer, I came home to find Mom and Robert sitting at the dining table with a stack of papers in front of them. They looked up when I walked in, and something about their expressions made me pause. "April," Mom said, her voice oddly formal, "we need to talk to you." I sat, a knot forming in my stomach. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" Mom slid some papers toward me. "Utility bills," I realized as I glanced at them. "We need to discuss the financial situation here." "What about it?" Robert cleared his throat. "Since you moved back, our expenses have increased significantly. water, electricity, heating, it's all gone up. I contribute to the grocery fund, I reminded her. I give you $300 every month, remember? That's more than my share of the food. Mom and Robert exchanged a look. That's just for food, Mom said, it doesn't cover the other expenses. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. What are you saying? We think it would be fair if you paid rent, Robert stated bluntly, $1,000 a month. Are you serious? My voice rose in disbelief. This is my house, Dad left it to me. I'm the one who should be charging rent, if anyone is. Robert's face hardened. Now listen here, young lady. We've been maintaining this house for 8 years while you were off living your life in Boston. We've paid the property taxes, fixed the roof, replaced the water heater. I never asked you to do any of that, I shot back. And I offered multiple times to help with major expenses, but Mom always said you had it covered. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to back me up, to say something in my defense. Instead, she looked away, her lips pressed together. Mom, I said, my voice smaller now, you can't seriously expect me to pay rent for my own house. If you can't contribute financially, Robert said coldly, then perhaps you should find somewhere else to live. The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to Mom again, sure she would object to her husband telling her daughter to leave her own home. But she just nodded slightly, agreeing with him. I left the room before they could see the tears threatening to spill. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what had just happened. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were deafening. Sleep eluded me that night. By morning, I'd moved from shock to anger. I dressed for work mechanically, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. When I went downstairs for breakfast, the whole family was already there, Mom, Robert, Jason slouched over his cereal, and Emma, who looked up with a smirk that told me she knew exactly what had happened the night before. So, she said sweetly as I poured a cup of coffee, when are you going to start paying rent? Or are you moving out? Something inside me snapped. I set my mug down carefully and smiled back at her. Actually, I've made a decision. All eyes turned to me. This house belongs to me, I said, my voice steady and calm despite the rage boiling inside. It was left to me by my father. Everyone else here lives in this house because I allow it. Robert started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. Starting next month, I'll be implementing a new arrangement. Each of you, Mom, Robert, Emma, and Jason, will pay $500 a month in rent, that's $2,000 total. A stunned silence fell over the kitchen. Emma's mouth hung open in shock. You're joking, Mom finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm absolutely serious, consider it the market rate for the area, split 4 ways. It's actually quite reasonable. You can't charge us rent, Emma shrieked, you're insane. I took a sip of my coffee, oddly calm in the face of their outrage. If you don't like the terms, you're welcome to find another place to live. I'm sure there are plenty of rental properties in Pinewood. You would throw out your own mother? Robert demanded, standing up to tower over me. I met his gaze steadily. No, I would charge my mother and her family a fair rent for a property they don't own. After everything we've done for you, Mom said, her voice trembling. We've maintained this house, paid all the bills. While living here for free, I cut in. And now you want to charge me rent for my own property. How is that any different from what I'm proposing? I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. Think it over, let me know what you decide. The drive to work was a blur. Part of me couldn't believe what I'd just done, but another part, a stronger part, knew it was long overdue. They'd pushed me too far, and something had to give. That night, I picked up takeout on the way home and ate in my room. No one spoke to me. The next day was the same, and the day after that. I'd become a ghost in my own house, ignored by everyone, even my mother. 2 weeks of icy silence passed. I bought my own groceries and kept them separate in the fridge. I did my laundry when no one else was around. I missed my mother, but I wouldn't back down, not this time. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, Mom and Robert cornered me in the living room. "We've made a decision," Robert announced stiffly, "we're moving out. We found an apartment on the other side of town." I nodded slowly, a mix of emotions washing over me. Relief that the tension would finally end, sadness that it had come to this, and a lingering anger that they, especially my mother, had put me in this position in the first place. "When?" I asked. "Next weekend," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've already signed the lease." "I'm taking what I paid for," Robert added, his tone challenging. "The washing machine, the dishwasher, the TV in the living room." "That's fine," I cut him off, "take whatever you bought." The next week was filled with the sounds of packing and moving. Emma made a point of slamming doors and drawers whenever I was nearby. Jason mostly kept to himself. Mom barely spoke to me, focusing instead on organizing and packing. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, watching her choose Robert and his children over me so definitively. On Friday night, Robert rented a moving truck. I stayed out of the way as they loaded furniture and boxes. Some of the items they took were definitely purchases my father had made, the dining table, some of the kitchen appliances, but I didn't have the energy to fight about it anymore. When they were nearly finished, I noticed them trying to maneuver the old grandfather clock that had been my father's pride and joy. It had stood in our entryway for as long as I could remember. "That stays," I said firmly, stepping into the hallway. Robert frowned. "I paid to have it repaired 3 years ago. It wasn't working when your father died." "The clock was my dad's. He bought it from an antique shop the year I was born." "It stays." For a moment, I thought he would argue, but Mom put a hand on his arm and shook her head slightly. They moved away from the clock. As they were making their final trip to the truck, Mom lingered behind in the kitchen. "I never thought it would end like this," she said quietly. "Neither did I replied, "but you gave me no choice." Mom looked away. "I thought you'd be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I echoed. Was it reasonable to let Emma treat me like an intruder? Was it reasonable to ask me to leave my own house for her birthday? Was it reasonable to side with your husband over your daughter at every turn? "Robert has been good to me, April. He took care of us after your father died. He moved into my house and acted like he owned it, and you let him." Mom sighed heavily. "I can see we're not going to agree on this. I should go, they're waiting for me." "Goodbye, Mom." And just like that, they were gone. The house, which had felt crowded and hostile for months, was suddenly, achingly empty. That first night alone, I wandered from room to room, taking stock of what remained and what I would need to replace. The living room was missing its couch and TV. The kitchen lacked a microwave and coffee maker. 3 of the bedrooms were now empty, stripped of beds and dressers. But instead of feeling sad or lonely, I felt a strange sense of peace washing over me. This was my house, really mine now, in a way it hadn't been since my father died. I could do whatever I wanted with it, fill it with my own choices, make it a home again. The next day, I drove to the nearest home goods store and bought a new couch, a coffee maker, and basics for the kitchen. I ordered a bed frame online and scheduled delivery of a new mattress. Over the weekend, I deep cleaned every room, opening windows to let fresh air circulate through the house. On Monday, I returned to work with a lighter heart. My coworkers noticed the change. "You seem different," my manager commented, "more relaxed." I smiled. "I am. Things have settled at home." Megan came over that evening to see the new arrangements. She whistled as she walked through the half-empty rooms. "Wow, they really cleaned you out, huh?" "Yep, but now I get to start fresh, make it mine again." She helped me arrange the new furniture and hung some photographs I'd framed, pictures of my dad and me fishing, of high school graduation, of the friends I'd made in Boston. "Do you regret it?" she asked as we sat on my new couch, drinking wine from coffee mugs because I hadn't replaced the glassware yet. "Standing your ground?" I thought about it for a moment. No, I miss my mom, and I wish things had turned out differently. But I don't regret standing up for myself. My birthday came in early October. I didn't expect to hear from Mom, but the silence still stung. Aunt Susan called to wish me happy birthday and awkwardly mentioned that she'd seen Mom and Robert at the grocery store, and they seemed to be doing well. She didn't even ask about me, did she? I said. Aunt Susan's hesitation was answer enough. Give her time, April, she's stubborn, just like you. I don't communicate with my mother or her family now. They didn't tell me their new address, and I haven't asked for it. Mom didn't even call on my birthday, which hurt, but it showed me clearly where her priorities lie, with Robert and his children, not with me. I hear from relatives that they're doing fine, and that's enough for me. I live alone in my house now, but I don't feel lonely. For the first time in years, I feel at peace. This is my home, and I've reclaimed it. Whatever the future holds, I know I made the right choice in standing up for myself. Dad would have been proud.